Governor. Thank you, folks. Flattery is fine as long as you don't inhale. I've said this before to the governor. If my mother were here, she'd think you were talking about my sister or my brother. If my dad were here, he would have believed it. I want you all to I am an obnoxious grandfather, among other things. But the love of my life and the life of my love, named after my deceased daughter, is up here in New York and going to be working here and hopefully going to law school here. And I want to introduce, she recently graduated from Penn, and I talked her into coming, and she's embarrassed, but this is Naomi Biden. I just want you to meet her. I am proud. My dad used to have an expression, for real. He'd say, you know your success as a parent when you look at your children and grandchildren and realize they turned out better than you. I'm a success. I'm a genuine success. Governor, you're a really good friend. I've told you before, and I've said this, I was talking to Maria backstage, that it's going to both say something good and bad about me, what I'm about to say, but I've been in public life and high elected office since I've been 29 years old. I got elected to the Senate before I was eligible to serve. I had to wait to be sworn in. And I've met every major head of state in the world during that period of time, and only because of my role as the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee and as vice president. And there's only one man I've ever met that I looked at, and I said it publicly. It slipped out about 15 years ago, but I've let it come out again and again. There's only one man or woman I've ever looked at and said, you know, that person's better than me. No, I mean it. They do their job better than I can do it. And that was your dad. That was Mario CUOMO, a man of immense power and conviction. And as the shuttle was an hour late, the ride was an hour and 20 minutes in from LaGuardia, which is looking much better. The reason I said that, New York, the part he didn't say, is I said New York is the finest city in the world, and it deserves the finest airport in the world. But that's how it got started. At any rate, but I was reminded, Maria, of your dad, that comment he made, at least I remember him making after he was out. One of the press guys said, well, what's different, Gov? What's different? He said, not much, except I get out, get in the back seat of the car, and it doesn't move now. Well, hell, I got in the airplane, sat in the middle of the seat, and it didn't go anywhere. Where the hell is Air Force Two when you need it? You know, I got to admit, I miss it. I miss Air Force Two. It's nice having the entire United States Air Force at your disposal, especially those Cobra helicopters. Anyway, it's an honor to be honored with Judith Rodin, who's an old friend and a great, great president of the University of Pennsylvania. We became friends, and the Rockefeller Foundation, and it's great to see you, Judith. And also Matthew Dowling, Kevin O'Connor, Lucia Eve. It's just an honor to be honored. I measure whatever award I get based on not on the importance of the name, but on the character of the institution and the consequence of the institution giving the award. And Help USA is an organization of character and of genuine consequence, started and led by people of enormous character and consequence. Governor, you and Maria, you're, as my father would say, a chip off the old block. I've known both of you for a long, long time. Your father was, I don't want to exaggerate it, my friend, but I mean, I really looked up to him, but he was good to me. But your father's not only my friend, he was brilliant, he was big-hearted, he was a leader with a moral conviction, and as we're approaching, as I was saying to Dowling wearing his green tie, I'm Gene Finnegan's son, tomorrow's St. Patrick's Day. But as we Irish say, the highest compliment you can give someone is say, he was a good man. That is the highest compliment among the Irish. your dad was a good man. And I believe he instilled in both of you the same basic value set my dad instilled in me and my siblings. At its base was the notion, my dad would say, the greatest sin of all, and I mean this sincerely, the greatest sin of all was the abuse of power. The abuse of power. And secondly, that it was built on the principle that every single solitary person, no matter who they were, was entitled to be treated with dignity. I never once in my life, not one single time in my life, saw my father be disrespectful to anyone based on their station. Not one single time in my life. When my father died, the most oft-used phrase was, he was a graceful gentleman. He was a high school educated, well-read, graceful gentleman. And that value set was imbued in, I think, the Cuomos and the Bidens, and probably most of you. This abhorrence of the abuse of power, defined by the belief, as I said, that everybody's entitled to be treated with dignity. Governor, it's no surprise to me that you've embraced that value set from the time you were a kid. You were a young man when you started this organization. And by the way, the thing he got bored with and moved to head up HUD. You know, it was a minor little operation we asked him to do, you know what I mean? But it's something you've done your whole life. Going back 30 years when you were first starting Help USA, that was around the same time I was drafting the Violence Against Women Act in the United States Senate. And when I introduced that bill in June of 1990, there was immediate and unexpected resistance from unexpected quarters. Fundamentalist groups, if you go back, as my wife who's a professor, so you go back and Google it, fundamentalist groups attacked me saying that domestic violence was a family affair. No, I'm being deadly earnest. It's hard to believe it now. It was Jerry Falwell and company defending it as a family affair. A man has a right to chastise his spouse. Other critics claim when we put in what you had already started, Governor, battered women's shelters, they were called, and I quote, Biden's, quote, indoctrination centers for runaway wives. It's almost like I'm making this up, but go back and check it for real. And even groups that I fully expected to support the legislation did not. All the major women's groups opposed it when it was written. Every one, and all the civil rights groups. Because they did it on the grounds that they thought it would distract from the more immediate concerns of gender equality and choice. But I owe Ellie Schmiel a big debt of gratitude because finally I got all of them around my conference table, 9 different groups, including the civil rights groups. Civil rights groups didn't like my installing the civil rights cause of action for violence against a woman. But finally, Ellie Schmiel sat there and looked around the table and said, what are we doing? Why don't we help this guy? And the reason we got the help is I went out to organizations like HELP. I went to the providers, state and local providers. I agreed to meet with a group of women who were providing, mostly women, some men, providing rape crisis shelters and temporary housing for women abused in the state of Rhode Island. I met in the state capitol. Then I went out to the state of Washington and did the same thing. And all of a sudden, the momentum began to build. So the community couldn't say, well, it's not our business. The governor's correct. It is our business, our moral obligation. So what really began to change, though, was what you did here with HELP, is when I went to my judiciary staff, and I said, look, this isn't moving very well. I want 2 reports written. Actually, Cynthia Hogan was the woman who came up with the first idea. Said, why don't we write a report, the day in the life of an American woman? We took 365 days a year. We went to 10 different states for each day and gave an actual case of a woman or girl being abused, including one where a father put his daughter's head in a vice and, it was all completely, thoroughly accurate, all taking place that year on those days. And it ripped the blindfold off. Everybody knew this dirty little secret was out there, but no one wanted to say anything. I'm not sure it's my business. You hear the next door neighbor's wife crying out at night. Oh, no, I can't. It's private. It's private. But we ripped the Band-Aid off. The second thing was, I asked my staff, and it took 5 months, to go back and survey, and we got a lot of constitutional scholars to come in and help from the outside, survey the criminal justice system, the criminal code in all 50 states. And we established the existence of a systematic bias built into the law that implied women were somehow still the property of their husbands. You all know the phrase rule of thumb, where it comes from. Back in the late 1300s in the English courts of common law, too many women were being killed, beaten to death by their husbands for chastising them. And the court wanted to do something, but not deny the right of a man to, quote, chastise his woman. So the rule was a common law rule. You could not chastise your wife with a rod thicker than the circumference of your thumb. That's where the phrase comes from. This cultural bias has been built in subtly through our entire English jurisprudential system. It still exists today. And then, if she was victimized by someone she knew, it must have been something she did or said. If she didn't know the attacker, it was appropriate to ask, what was she wearing? What was she wearing? As a result of my being obnoxiously persistent, a state judge got thrown off the court for throwing out a rape case. No doubt it was a brutal rape because the woman was not wearing underwear. Think how many times today, even today, the violence on our campuses. 1 in 5 young women dropped off in September during her tenure in school will be the victim of sexual violence. Think of how many times we ask, what were you wearing? Did you have anything to drink? What did you say to him? No means no. Period. No matter when it's said. No matter how it's said. So we went back and looked at these state laws, and we found out that in my own state of Delaware, a progressive state, there was a law in the books that came off fairly quickly that said that if, God forbid, you and I went out on a date for the first time and I knew you, it was the first time I went out with you, and I brutally raped you, and someone jumped out of an alley you didn't know and equally brutally raped you, that first person could be tried for first-degree rape and a life sentence. But I could not be. You could not be tried for first-degree rape, no matter how brutal it was, if the attacker knew you. Implication, must have been something you should have known. After over 1,000 hours of hearings, as pointed out by the Supreme Court, when the day in the life of finally was published and the results of the study, all of a sudden things began to change because of an awful lot of courageous young women who came forward. And in the process, the law did some good. Rates of domestic violence have fallen by 60%, although reporting is way up. State criminal statutes have changed. Federal criminal statutes have changed. 2,000 shelters and rape crisis centers are being funded. Added protection for Native American women and LGBT community. $250 million for transitional housing a year. Sum total, $6 billion invested in state and local communities. And every time I go through that, when I speak about violence against women, I then disappoint the federal community by saying, but you know, none of it would be worth a damn without organizations like HELP. I'm not being solicitous. I'm being literal. It's no hyperbole to say that Help USA has set the standard, a national model, particularly in the fight against homelessness. It's not just domestic violence survivors, but everyone, but anyone, HIV patients, returning veterans with serious psychological problems. HELP and all these organizations around the country are the people who reach out and touch that woman and that child. This is one woman, one family at a time. It's precise. It's individual. None of it matters unless there's people like you who are there and hear the horrible stories, or there at the emergency ward to pick him or her up, or there to give shelter. Put your arm around that little child who doesn't have any idea what in the hell has happened. You have 52 residence programs helping 8,000 people a day from New York to Pennsylvania to Texas, Nevada, helping them find transitional housing, permanent housing, 400,000 people a day. You're working with Walter Reed. Marie and I were talking about it, where I spent a lot of time, both as a patient, with a couple cranial aneurysms, but as a supporter. A military hospital to ensure that the returning veterans, you realize I carry in my pocket, I think I took it out to make room, but I carry a card in my pocket. Every morning my staff calls over to the Defense Department to find out exactly how many people have been wounded, exactly how many have been killed. Because every single one of these fallen angels represents an entire community. But you know what? There's 300,000 of these heroes who've come home. All unseen wounds, but devastated. Devastated. The suicide rate is staggering. The homelessness is beyond sad. And Help USA got engaged before we paid any attention. It's been a national model, not just in housing, but in access to health care, education, decent jobs. Because the governor understands, as my dad used to say, every time since my dad, we moved from Scranton because there were no work, down to Wilmington, Delaware. And my dad, from that point on, would say, when someone talked about a job, he'd say, Joey, a job's about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about your place in the community. It's about respect. It's about being able to hold your head up. It's being able to look your child in the eye and say, honey, it's going to be okay. Help USA is simply the best at what it does in the nation. It's truly a national model. But let me conclude by saying, as much great work as we've done, we face some real challenges ahead. We thought things were moving in the right direction. We just passed $6.4 billion in research money for cancer and diseases to find out that there's a new budget. There's a change in the landscape out there, folks. So Gov, you and I, your sister and everyone in this room, we have a hell of a lot of work to do. There are those attempting to shift the focus. For example, instead of focusing on the fact that 40% of the homeless youth on the street are identified as lesbians, gay, bisexual, and transgender, rejected by their families out in the street, And what do we do about that? We're now focusing on whether or not a transgender child, which bathroom they can use. Instead of working to give life and meaning to the proposition that mental health should be covered as thoroughly and as significantly as physical health, something Teddy Kennedy and your father fought for their whole lives, finally got established. Now we're relitigating the proposition whether or not health care is a right. I thought we settled that. Instead of encouraging immigrant women to come out of the shadows, protect themselves, because they are victimized in the extreme, because their abusers know they cannot go anywhere, report it. We finally changed the law in a bipartisan way 2 years ago so they wouldn't risk deportation. Instead of that, now we're having every immigrant woman who is abused. The worst kind of captivity is in your own home, not in a jail, in your own home. And what are we forcing them to do? We're forcing them to make the Hobson's choice: continue to be brutalized or be deported. Look, lest you think I'm a bit of an alarmist on this point, and I'll conclude with this. Listen to the 30 scholarship winners you honor today. Listen to their stories. I've been listening to those young heroes and older heroes my whole life. My mom used to say, "Joey, remember, you're defined by your courage and you're redeemed by your loyalty." These young people are nothing but courage. And so many have been trapped in that invisible prison. And what they need most of all is hope. Just hope. That's why the hotline meant so much we put it in. Just be able to pick up the phone, screw up the courage and say, I can't give it, I'm afraid he's going to walk. Oh, I need help, please. It's all about hope. Governor, I've come to know you well. You were my son Bo's friends. Governor would tell me how he and Bo used to sit down and talk about the burdens of their fathers. Not burdens, but their fathers. A little burden, I think. But I know you. I know you're not going anywhere. I know none of you in this room are going anywhere. This isn't about politics, guys. This isn't Democrat, Republican. This isn't liberal. This is life and death. This is life and death. This is sanity and insanity. This is freedom and being caged. That's what this is all about. As my dad would say, it's about dignity. And I know some of you women in this audience, maybe some of you men, have been victimized. Maybe the people around you don't even know that ever happened. You know how much hope it gives to women who are trapped now to know that people have come forward and they made it. I'm not walking away. I'm sure none of you are. I'm no longer Vice President of the United States overseeing the Violence Against Women Office, which the President was, and the Attorney General were kind enough to give me authority over when I was there. But I'm setting up a foundation to continue to do this work and hopefully work with the government, God willing. I've quoted my father several times. Let me conclude with one last thing he repeated often to any of us who listen. He said, the greatest sin of all is the abuse of power, but the cardinal sin was a man raising his hand to a woman or a child. There is no justification whatsoever other than self-defense for a woman being brutalized by a man. If she got up and was stark naked and walked through the hotel lobby, she could be arrested for indecent exposure, but no man has a right to touch her. No man has a right to lay a hand on a woman. That's what you've been all about. I think thank you for this award. More importantly, I thank you for all the work you're going to continue to do here. We've got a lot more to do, and God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you.